Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's tour, Stories of Pioneering Women Artists in the Lower East Side with On This Spot. I am sure all of you know who HDC is, but if you don't, the Historic Districts Council is the citywide advocate for New York's historic neighborhoods. We work with more than 500 communities across the city to help preserve and celebrate the places that matter to them. Today's tour is part of HDC's program Six to Celebrate. The purpose of Six to Celebrate is to provide strategic resources to neighborhood groups at critical moments to reach their preservation goals. The six elected groups receive HGC's hands-on help on all aspects of their efforts over the course of the year and continued supports in years to come. Lower East Side is not a 2025 group, but we continue to work with them very closely. This program is supported in part by the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, the New York City Council, and the New York State Council on the Arts. If you like our programming, we hope that you will support us as well. Our upcoming programming includes virtual Six to Celebrate tours of Bushwick, a preservation school class on the restoration of the Farley Post Office, and a book talk about the history of Queens. Information about all of our upcoming programming can be found on our website, hdc.org. If you have any questions about our programming, you can contact me at marbulu@hdc.org. Now I will hand it over to co-founder and executive director of On This Spot, Loretta Howard.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm Loretta Howard, as you said, executive director and co-founder of On This Spot. And what we're going to do tonight is screen our introductory video and then talk a little bit about the project. And then we'll show you some of the films of the women in the Lower East Side, and then we can discuss how we work. So, Michelle, want to screen the intro?
Just a moment.
On This Spot, New York City, Stories of Pioneering Women Artists. On This Spot is a map of a woman's revolution in art. Neighborhood by neighborhood, decade by decade. From the 1950s to the 2000s. Men made the rules and women broke the rules. A diverse and inclusive group. We are retelling art history with the stories of these women, and we are putting women on the map. Women artists changed the art world and changed New York City forever. We take you there, behind the closed doors, the cold water flats, the lofts of Soho, the clubs and the cafes of the village, the galleries, Lower East Side, Chelsea, Uptown, Downtown, where it happened, how it happened, on this spot. Come with us and meet the women artists who broke boundaries, women who astonished the city and astonished the world. These are their stories, and these are their places. Stand on the spot where history was made.
That is a very fascinating, great intro video. How did you start on this spot? How did it get how did it originate?
Thank you. Well, I mean, I think it's probably has to do with the fact that I grew up on West 10th Street between 5th and 6th in the 1960s and 70s. It was a five-story walk-up. And it was the same apartment that Leonard Bernstein lived in before he got famous and moved up to the Dakota. But my mother was a novelist, and there were lots of writers and poets and artists, bohemians Marcel Duchamp lived on our block, so he could be close to the Marshall Chess Club. And my mother and I would sometimes see Louise Nevelson, and she was wearing her extraordinary dramatic clothing and her false eyelashes and really striding around like a queen. Um, and I'm sure, as many of you know, that she would pick up bits of discarded wood from the streets and transform them into her sculptures. And so in that way, bits of our neighborhood are hanging in the Whitney in the current Louise Nevelson show. Um, but back then, the village was affordable. My mother paid $350 a month, and brownstones housed painters, and storefronts became art studios. But so the artistic history of my neighborhood is fascinating, I think, but it's not obvious when you're just walking down the street. Um, but those little stories that spark wonder, that's what I want to uncover and share in On This Spot.
That's very interesting. Can you give us an overview of what On This Spot does?
Yeah, I mean, I should say that it started because my co-founder, Tony Gans, who is an art collector and a Hollywood producer, came back to New York after visiting London, where he had seen the Blue Plaque scheme. And he was surprised that there wasn't anything like that in New York, especially for some of the very famous artists like Eva Hesse, who was a woman that an artist he had a particular relationship with. And we both agreed that post-war art history in New York is extraordinary. I mean, it's parallel only to maybe the Renaissance in Italy, right? But there's hardly any markers. However, in New York, landlords don't want plaques for the most part, and many historic spots like the Cedar Tavern and others are gone. They might be a CVS now, right? So you wouldn't want to put a plaque on that. So we came up with a different solution, which was short form documentaries. And these act as kind of digital place markers, but they also allow us to tell a deeper, more engaging visual story rather than just names and dates. And unlike typical map-based history projects, our videos bring, we think, the past to life in a way that's never quite been done before. I mean, what the that's how we started, but what we really want to do is tell the stories of women artists in a way that brings them to life in 3-minute videos. And these are both the famous ones you may have heard of, like Louise Nevelson, and ones that you may never have heard of, like Mine Okubo, or there's many others. Um, so, so imagine you're walking down the Bowery, up from Canal, and there, trucks are honking, and there's traffic, and you pass the Prince Tea Shop at 134 Bowery. What you probably don't know is that up above in the little dormer attic, Eva Hesse was working with materials that she got from Canal Street, from Canal Plastics, in fact, and she would completely change art history. Or a few steps down is 98 Bowery. And today, the ground floor is a restaurant called Funny Barbecue. But upstairs, Maya Lin was designing models for some of America's most important monuments, right? It was there that the Vietnam Veterans Memorial was designed and the Civil Rights Memorial. So the streets may have changed, but the stories are still there. And that's what we want to reveal is the hidden stories behind those closed doors. So we celebrate women artists in these neighborhoods to correct gender imbalance in art history and make women's stories part of New York City's cultural heritage. I mean, if you think about it, there are 150 statues in New York City, and only 5 are of women, right? And in London, the blue plaque scheme, 85% of those plaques are of men. And I don't know the figures for New York's plaques, but I suspect it's not much different. So there's real inequity.
Absolutely. Can you tell us about how you put these stories together?
Yeah, so each of our videos is really rigorously researched. I mean, we work with artists, artist foundations, historians, scholars. So the research runs deep, but we always connect that scholarship with biography. Because to really understand and connect with the artist and her art, you need to know her story too. So it's the kind of aha moment that I love. When the art and the city and the person all come together and click. For example, like when I found out that Kiki Smith once worked as an EMT, riding around in ambulances in New York to give her an intimate inside knowledge of the human body. And if you think about her work, it graphically details the human body. So that was hands-on research for her. Adrian Piper, the great feminist, she moonlighted as a go-go dancer in Upper East Side nightclubs. So it was a sly way of her observing women on view as spectacle. And that's what she deals with in her art to a large degree, is relationships of the viewer to the viewed. So fascinating that was her day job for a short period. And say Collab, which is collaborative arts projects, they ran their own scrappy cable TV station back in the 80s when there was such a thing. It was called Potato TV. And it was filmed on 23rd Street. And the idea was that they would bypass the gatekeepers to the art world, right? So they wanted to achieve a democratic access to culture. So it's those kinds of details, right? The lived-in experiences that really make the artists and their art and the neighborhoods all come alive. So Michelle, let's watch Martha Diamond video? Martha Diamond. Martha Diamond, 268 Bowery, a large imposing stone building right below West Houston Street. It was a former flop house. When she moved there in 1969, the neighborhood was on the fringe. To be a woman living here alone was downright dangerous. She remembers the police chalk outlines on the sidewalks, stark reminders of the city's raw edge. Yet, New York City was her muse. Buildings became her characters. She painted Manhattan cityscapes with cinematic intensity, blocky forms rendered in thick, slashing, lush brushstrokes. Her paintings are boldly reductive, displaying light, rhythm, and distilling the city's energy into something at once material and dreamlike. Born in 1944, she grew up in Manhattan, the daughter of a doctor for the New York City Fire Department. As a girl, she rode with him on his weekend and night calls, witnessing the magical nocturnal city and its lights. She lived in Stuyvesant Town and recalls seeing the buildings from her balcony. She was tough. She enjoyed many career successes and prestigious teaching opportunities. Her career recognition began late in life. She remained in the same bare-bones Bowery loft throughout. Diamond's inner circle was small but formidable. Fellow painters like Jane Freilicher, Yvonne Jacquet, and Alex Katz. They were among the few who were ever invited into the sanctuary of her studio. Her singular conviction was forged by a strong, steady daily rhythm. Seldom cooking, every day she ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner at the same spot, an old-world Italian social club on Mott Street. It was more than a restaurant. It was a neighborhood refuge. She was a voracious reader. Her social circle included many poets, and the nexus of the scene was the Poetry Center on St. Mark's Place. She wrote extensively herself, while amassing an atlas of notebooks filled with clippings and sketches turned to collages. Now, fresh audiences are discovering her work, seeing New York through her eyes. The light moves, the buildings endure, and the stories, hers among them, continue to rise. So in this video, I hope you can see the city really kind of breathing through the screen and her art. And I think you feel her memory of riding around with her father, watching buildings burn. And in this way, her paintings aren't just of the city. They transform into acts of remembrance of the city. You know, we've always talked about New York as being sort of a main character in all of our videos. And the way we all carry the city around in our minds connects to psychogeography, a term that Guy Debord coined to describe how emotions and memories imprint onto a place. So in this way, ordinary streets like the Bowery can become layered with meaning, or you know, like the block I grew up on can. So do you want to, should we screen another? Let's screen Pat Pasloff now. Pat Pasloff moved into her former synagogue building at 80 Forsyth Street in 1963. She was 35 years old and had devoted her young life to painting. Later, her older husband Milton Resnick would buy his own separate synagogue around the corner at 87 Eldridge Street, which now houses their joint foundation and exhibition space. They would live and work in these two distinct buildings for the next 28 years until their deaths. They had his and her synagogues. Pasloff's legacy is one of generosity and creative spirit. She established the foundation, which is a thriving artistic hub in the Lower East Side. Her vision continues to ignite inspiration and foster a dynamic community of artists. Pasloff's studio had 20-foot ceilings. She did her own masonry work on the rough rock walls. It was her sanctuary. A frequenter of flea markets, Pasloff was a compulsive collector of objects and books that lined her space and filled her walls. she joined her neighbors in daily Chinese Tai Chi fan dances in a city park across the street. Fascinated by moving energy around, this chi spilled over into her painting. The local community came to her large annual holiday parties. Always looking out for others, she made astrology charts by the hundreds and would only trust you once she understood your chart. Raised in New York City, going to Queens College, Paslow felt confined by tradition. She won a scholarship to the avant-garde art school, Black Mountain College. Bill and Elaine de Kooning were there. They rode the train together back to the city. In 1950s downtown New York, she found herself amongst the exciting world of abstract expressionists. She said, "I felt like I had walked into a chapter of a Russian novel." The predominantly male Abex artists had formed the Arts Club. Pushing back, Paslow launched and ran a short-lived rival, the Wednesday Night Club, that welcomed more women and younger artists. She became a dedicated and adored teacher who cared about her students deeply. Later, she would complement her allegiance to abstraction with images of animals which she so dearly loved. Pat Paslow's paintings are lyrical and intimate, always with an intensity of touch. She believed in the act of painting, along with its daily surprises. Wonderfully, she once wrote to a student, "Think with your brush, the finger of your brain." Thanks. So Pat Paslow created her living space in her studio, literally doing the masonry work herself. And she practiced Tai Chi across the street off Essex with local neighbors. And, you know, she, as the video says, she channeled that chi or that energy straight from Seward Park into her paintings. And she also hosted parties that built community, and that's preservation too, right? She herself founded the Paslow Resnick Foundation, which operates today at 87 Eldridge Street. And it is a beautiful renovation of an old synagogue, and it's free and open to the public, and they have exhibitions and all sorts of events. It's really fascinating to go there. And since her whole life was so community-minded, we really wanted that video to be a testament to that spirit for her. They're all slightly different aspects. So our third and final screening will be Grace Hartigan, if you want to go to that. Grace Hartigan. Grace Hartigan was one of the most celebrated and uncompromising painters of her time. In 1950, she moved to 25 Essex Street in the heart of the Lower East Side, the hub of immigrant life. She lived on practically nothing, in what she called the crummiest building. Hartigan was a self-taught painter with ambition and big dreams. In 1945, she and her young son Jeffrey relocated to the city. By the early 1950s, she was creating improvisational paintings like Months and Moons. It features Pollock-inspired drips, de Kooning-esque organic shapes, and references to women's bodily cycles. Other breakthrough paintings soon followed. By the time she settled into her studio, briefly shared with fellow artist Al Leslie, Grace had become an integral part of the abstract expressionist circle. Helen Frankenthaler was one of her closest friends. But juggling her rapidly ascending career and motherhood proved difficult. She made the decision to send Jeffrey to live with his grandparents, allowing her to fully dedicate herself to her art. Early in her career, she held exhibitions under the name George Hartigan, inspired by writers George Sand and George Eliot. The choice was practical. Men's work had more value. Yet Hartigan always insisted that she was treated as an equal among male artists because of her relentless dedication and groundbreaking success in the art world. Hartigan's creative circle extended beyond painters. She found a soulmate in poet Frank O'Hara. Together, they both celebrated the experience of modern urban life and spontaneous creativity, often drinking at the Cedar Tavern or catching jazz performances at the Five Spot. Hartigan's Bridal series belies her cynicism towards 1950s American culture, which promoted marriage as gendered role-playing, an empty ritual. Opposed to the commodification of women, she remarked on the local store windows full of mannequins in cheap white lace bridal gowns. On the flip side, Hartigan embraced the rich tapestry of the immigrant experience. Her real muse and true inspiration was in the vibrant street life below her window. Local vendors, pickle stands, and bakery displays fueled her bold urban paintings, which she coined city life. By the end of the decade, life took another turn. Hartigan married a doctor and moved to Baltimore, where she painted for the next 5 decades. She found a studio with rugged urban charm, reminiscent of the spirit of her beloved, bustling Lower East Side. Thanks. So yeah, I mean, in this video, I think we see that Grace Hartigan's paintings were pulled straight from the window below her on 25 Essex Street. And I love that she called it the crummiest place, but it was all she could afford. But her paintings paid direct homage to the neighborhood, so, full of vendors and fruit and vegetable stands, and her titles are references. There's one called Essex and Hester, Grand Street Brides. So it's very specific. And her work is really about the vibrancy of immigrant life, and capturing the experience of the city. So it's, it might be hard to pick out the pickle stands and the pickle stands. It's about the experience and the energy. And her collaborator and great friend, the poet Frank O'Hara, also sought to do the same thing in his lunch poems, if anybody's familiar with O'Hara's lunch poems. But they both worked to capture what they thought was very important, the energy of the urban experience.
I can see and feel the urban energy in that video. It is interesting that you extend beyond art history and out into the city and in the neighborhoods.
Yeah, I mean, the spirit of On This Spot is not just about artists, right? This is something that's so interesting to me, that the New York Times architectural critic Michael Kimmelman writes about concepts that he calls intangible heritage and cultural mapping. And it's how we preserve not just buildings, but the soul of a place. And what makes the Lower East Side or any of these neighborhoods so beloved isn't just the tenement buildings, it's the diversity, it's the creativity, it's the energy. And so we tell these stories to capture how all of that is interwoven into the artistic process, and it is. So we go beyond statues and plaques, And our cultural mapping, to adopt his term, which I love, is about lived experiences. And we hope you can really feel that in the stories we tell.
How do you like choose to structure your work?
Yeah, well, it took a minute to figure it out, but we were encouraged by Bloomberg Connects, the app, to organize it by neighborhood, so they could literally map it. And when you go onto the Bloomberg Connects app, you can see that. So it's organized by neighborhood and then by decade. So you would be able to search on 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. And that's what we cover, the post-war years up until 2000. It's completely free. It's available on our website, and everything that Michelle has been playing is directly from our website. And it's also on Vimeo, YouTube, and Bloomberg Connect. So in this way, we hope that we speak to anyone who's curious about art, the city, women's history, um, diverse voices, or, just inspiring stories.
What is going on now? What are you guys partnering with?
Well, we're now in our third year and we've launched over 50 original videos. They're all on our website, and audience engagement is rising and our follower base continues to grow. We're proud to receive support from the New York Federation of the Arts and Bloomberg Philanthropies and Helen Frankenthaler Foundation and many others. But the majority of the funding really comes from individuals like you. And we collaborate with many partners. So some of our partners are the Brooklyn Rail, the Feminist Institute, even the Guerrilla Girls are a partner, the New York Public Library, and you, our newest partner, Historic Districts Council. Thank you for being a partner.
Thank you. That is a very impressive list. What do you guys have planned for the future?
Well, in say 5 years, we hope to expand the map. So we've started with Lower Manhattan, where most of the activity was happening early on, and we're just going to fill up the map as we go up. So we plan to do hundreds of artists, and our goal is to reach around 1 million viewers. We do one neighborhood per year. So we've done three. We've done the Village, Soho, and the Lower East Side. And this summer, we're producing a few videos on the women of Coente's Slip. So that was a tiny little area off the seaport where artists inhabited studios back in the late 50s, 60s, now Wall Street. And then soon we're starting on a new series centered in Tribeca, followed by Chelsea and Midtown and Upper West Side, Upper East Side, Harlem, Spanish Harlem, etc. So lots to do.
If someone listening wants to get involved, how would they do that?
Well, I'm glad you asked. We'd really love you to sign up for a newsletter, and I will put that link in the chat. It's also just on our website. It says newsletter, and you can sign up right there. And it's a fun newsletter to get. I mean, I know we all have too many things in our inbox, but we feature one video every few weeks. And as you see, they're short, they're only 3 minutes, they don't take long to watch, and we hope they really, really stay with you. So I'll put that in the chat, and we would love that. And second, one thing I think that Historic Districts Council in particular could help with is to build relationships. So we want to continue to gain community partnerships for our upcoming neighborhoods. So Coente Slip, Tribeca, and Chelsea in the coming years. So, we have a strong relationship with Village Preservation for the Village and Soho Memory Project in Soho. So we'd really like to know if there are other community partners that we could we could join forces with and do screenings and have webinars like this and just sort of spread the word. We'd also love an introduction to the New York City Department of Tourism. And I think that would be a perfect fit. Um, and then, by donating tax deductible dollars, there's things we could do. We would love to have someone underwrite the video of an artist, and people have done that. Someone they really feel strongly about and love, or is in their collection, or was on their block, or whatever it might be. So we call that Adopt a Spot. But also help with subway and bus outdoor media campaign. I mean, it would be just a dream to have little snippets of our videos playing on bus stops or in subway stations in the very neighborhood that those stories were being taken place. So that would be wonderful. The other thing we'd love to have is screening our introductory videos at nonprofit art cinemas like, IFC or Film Forum. That would really expand our audience greatly, we think. So those are our dreams for the future.
That all sounds great. Very big dreams. Love it. Several of those neighborhoods are also Six Celebrate partners, so we can certainly put you in
Thank
contact with
you.
people that we've worked with there. And also, I would say talk to Urban Archive about getting the videos on the Link NYCs.
Yeah, so they are going to be able to host video soon.
Great. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think
you're
that
doing
last
it
time we
through.
checked in, they couldn't host video,
Okay,
but you're right, they're working on that. And yep, I'm making a note.
fantastic.
And I put the link in the chat for the newsletter.
Would I know you have many neighborhoods to go through, and if you go through all of Manhattan, that will certainly take you some time. But would the plan be to expand to other boroughs, hopefully in the future?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, Brooklyn is where it's at now, right? If you're a young artist, I think that's the most affordable place, and that's where there's a real community. And I think in Queens too, especially. But yes, of course, it's just that there's so many extraordinary, rich stories in each of these neighborhoods as we go up. So that's our priority. But absolutely, we'd love to.
Do you think you guys would expand beyond 2000?
Well, yes. I mean, I think the problem is that you have to set boundaries now, or you'd be overwhelmed,
Absolutely.
right? So we've said 2000, but by the time, we've covered all of Manhattan and we're on to Brooklyn or something, it could be, if we're at 2025, we could be at 2035, and then it would make a great deal of sense to go back and do sort of the next batch. I mean, the other way it's expandable, but I mean, it's hard to imagine, um, hard to imagine being able to do it all. But you could, it's a way of storytelling that could expand to music history and theater history and
Absolutely.
literature and you name it. Um, So that's another way it could grow. And yeah, somebody said there's strong creative artist community in Staten Island. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's probably the outer boroughs now are much more vibrant than Manhattan because that's where it's affordable. You can have larger spaces and it's so absolutely.
I know, seeing all of those huge loft spaces, I'm like, can't believe anybody would have that. They're so big.
Yeah.
And having them be affordable, wild.
But often with no heat or hot water or
Yeah, no,
lights
there were
or
reasons.
yeah.
They weren't the most comfortable living spaces.
Or in the Martha Diamond video, I mean, she talked about it being really quite dangerous for women at night back then, before pre-gentrification.
Yes, thankfully, that is no longer a problem, for the most part, at least. So we can now open it up. If anyone has any questions, you can add them to the chat.
I mean, I'll say that while people are thinking about that, one question that we often get is about the sort of criteria for how we choose who we choose. And it's hard because we can only do about 15 to 18 videos a year. Um, that's, the resources that we have, the time. And And so we want to have a mix of the most important women um, that contributed to artistic history. And some of them are very famous. I mean, we have Kusama and Yoko Ono and Helen Frankenthaler, Joan Mitchell, right? But you also, and maybe even more so, it's interesting to find out about the women who you may not have heard of, who were doing extraordinary things and just never had sort of, access or entree into the art world. And some of those stories are often totally different ethnic backgrounds. I mean, that one of the videos that I love is set in the village, and it's Mine Okubo. She was a Japanese American artist who was interned in World War II, and uh, after being released, came to the village and chronicled her time in the camps with beautiful drawings that are in a collection, which might even be considered one of the first graphic novels. And that's a beautiful story. Or Selma Burke, who was a Black sculptor who lived on 10th Street and did a portrait of FDR that is, according to her, the same portrait that's on the US dime. And yet she never got credit.
Hmm.
So those kinds of stories, telling not just the famous women, but a diverse group of women is important to us.
Yeah, that is fantastic. All the, yes, the untold stories. Someone asked, have you looked at female artists prior to 1950? I'm curious to know about some of these earlier art figures.
Yeah, no, I mean again, we have to set parameters
Hmm.
because otherwise the task would be too big. To take on, and that's something we could do, in the same way we could go forward in time into what's now considered, contemporary art as opposed to post-war art, which is really what we're dealing with. We could go back and we could go into some of those wonderful stories of earlier women as well. But the post-war period in America is our great, great period, right? This is where the entire world starts shifting from Paris to New York, and it stays here for a very, very long time. So that's the sort of gem, the crux of it. But yeah, we'd love to go back. And sometimes we can cheat a little bit. We'd love to do something on Helen Levitt, for instance, because although she's, known for that extraordinary film footage and photographs of Spanish Harlem, she, all the way through to the 1970s, was photographing other stories too in the Lower East Side that would fit into the post-war period. So there are ways to sneak some of those great women in.
Well, yes, presumably if, they are prolific, then they, lasted for quite some time, as you're saying. So they can fit into that bucket either way. Do you have any parameters in terms of like if like how long they had to live or have a studio? Or is it like, oh, they didn't actually live or have a studio, but they frequented, their artist friends in this neighborhood a lot? Like, what are the parameters there?
Yeah, I mean, we do want to put them on our art map, right? So if they were, just there's some women, for instance, that had exhibitions in New York, but never really lived in New York. That is Yeah, I'll tell you, there are again very interesting ways to include some people. So when you watch Susan Weil, you'll see that some of her friends from Black Mountain College, like Ruth Asawa, whose work I adore, but she was absolutely San Francisco, right? Ruth Asawa was not in New York. She had some shows in New York. She might have visited once or twice, but it's just she really, she really wasn't ever living and working
Sure.
in New York. But because of her association with Susan Weil, we're able to include her because Susan said this was one of the great influences. This was one of my great friends from Black Mountain. So, it's just a mention, but we're able to get her in there. But we really want to be able to put, I mean, the harder problem actually, Michelle, is that the itinerant nature of artists is such that there's so many studios throughout New York, right? Because they're moving because one is bigger or cheaper, or they get kicked out. Um,
Who's your favorite artist?
hmm, I'll tell you, I think that if I would have dared answer that question years ago, I really now feel that there are just so many interesting stories, and it's just a question of from what lens you're looking. Like the Mineo Kubo lens is so interesting, or the Selma Burke, and so it's more about the story in a sense these days for me than a favorite.
That makes sense. It was a bit of an unfair question. I was like, let's see what she says. But also, that was my question. No one asked that. I take full responsibility. Do we have any other questions? Well, it does not seem so. Um, do you have anything else you want to end on?
No, I mean, no, please watch them all. They're on our website and Vimeo and YouTube and Bloomberg Connects and whatever way you want to do it. And we're only just getting started. So, we've done 50. Tonight we were looking at a group in the Lower East Side, really thinking about that neighborhood. But, as we continue along, we fold in new neighborhoods and so many more stories. So this is just the beginning.
And you guys had a like a physical space exhibition as well, right?
Well, so we don't have a physical space, but yes, we had a partnership this summer with the Leroy Street architectural firm on Allen, 65 Allen Street. And we did a window exhibition with a map and the videos playing. And it was really wonderful to watch people walking down Allen and then looking and seeing our videos play in the window, and looking at the map and saying, "Oh my goodness, that was right here," or Adrian Piper was over there, so and so was down the street. So that's something we would love to continue to do as we move through the neighborhoods, is have some kind of it's like a sort of a temporary plaque, if you will, some sign, some way of pushing out into the street and telling people that these stories are right under their feet.
Absolutely, yes. If you set up another one of those, please do let us know. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, we were trying to figure out how to coordinate that, but I do think that this medium worked better for us. But yes, everyone, please do go check out their website. They have a lot of great content. Again, you can check out our website as well. We also have a lot of videos on our YouTube channel, so please go check out all the additional content that we both have. And thank you very much, Loretta. This is fantastic, very interesting. Thank you, everyone, for joining tonight. And again, like I said, if anyone has any questions, you can just contact me. And I guess if they have any questions, they can contact you as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. Thank you very much, Michelle, and Historic Districts Council. You're a great organization. I'm really happy to be partnering with you.
Thank you. Likewise. Have a good night, everyone.
You too.